Hey YouTube, for this video I wanted to take a look at a new game that I just came across, and there's a little bit of a story to this one. So in addition to being an Axis and Allies enthusiast, I am also an aspiring game designer, and a couple of weeks ago I had the opportunity to go and visit Protospiel Chicago. Protospiel, it occurs in a number of different cities throughout the year, Chicago being closest one to where I live. And aspiring game designers or game players who want to see, what's being worked on can go and play test different games. And I have, since my grad school days, had an idea for a post World War One game, basically involving diplomacy amongst the great powers after World War One, and all of the political intrigue and the international events that were going on at the time, and trying to demonstrate through gameplay, through kind of a simulation, if you will, how each nation is trying to balance its own goals, some of which are selfish, some of which are for the good of the international community as a whole, but they're having to balance those because oftentimes countries will have an incentive, to be part of the League of Nations. Oh, we want to all agree on a resolution or something like that, but when it comes to enforcing it, maybe we're going to pursue our own self-interests and not actually follow through on something. Or maybe we're going to pursue our national interests to the detriment of the international community. And so my game was based on the fact that as each nation tried to pursue its goals, it makes the international community less and less stable. And if the international community gets too unstable, then World War II breaks out and everybody loses. So without getting too much into the mechanics, that's the basis of the game that I had been working on. And we play tested it, got some good feedback. And as part of that feedback, a couple of my players told me that my general design reminded them very much of another game, a game called Twilight Struggle. And I said, Twilight Struggle, what's that? And the more they told me about it, the more interested I got, until as soon as I got home, I ordered a copy online, and it arrived a couple days later. And I've looked over the rule book, and I have watched a few videos online, have not had a chance to play it yet. But the more I'm learning, the more intrigued I'm getting about this game. It looks very, very interesting, very high quality as far as the mechanics go. The basic premise is that it's set during the Cold War, so you've got the U.S. and the Soviet Union. But it's not like Axis and Allies in that you're moving armies around and rolling dice. No, in this game, you're actually vying for influence. And there's influence over individual countries. Each one of the countries has a little box, and I'll zoom in on them here in a little bit. And then countries are in regions. So we've got Africa, we've got the Middle East, which is kind of this bluish color. We've got Europe, purple. We've got Asia, or Southeast Asia down here, and then regular Asia up here, and there are rules about that. And then we also have South and Central America. And so you're going to be vying for influence, and you have all sorts of cards that you get on your turn. And there's a early, mid, and late war deck, or a deck for each one. And so you'll have different events, different possibilities, depending on what part of the Cold War you're in. Let's just flip over this as an example. So this is a late war, actually. Late war event, tear down this wall. And so this allows the U.S. to put extra influence in East Germany, and then take another action, a free coup attempt elsewhere. So there will be cards that are good for the U.S., cards that are good for the Soviet Union, and cards that could be good for either. Like, for example, I know that you can trigger the Iran-Iraq war, and that could potentially be good for either side, just depending on how it's played. It's not like tear down this wall that's specifically good for the U.S. There is also a space race counter, and you can do things to advance on the space race. The first person to get to certain levels gets a bonus, And then when the next person, so let's say the U.S. gets, I don't know, let's say here, what is that? Opponent choose and show headline card first. We don't get into exactly what a headline card is. Basically, let's say the U.S. got there first, they would get this bonus until the Soviet Union managed to catch up to that point, and then that bonus would just go away. The Soviets don't get it also. This is a whoever gets there first bonus, and then you lose it when the next person gets there. Let's see. So there is, of course, a lot to this game, and we're just going to do a very brief overview. Oh, there's also the DEFCON status, which is the countdown to nuclear war. And if at any time this gets to nuclear war, then the game ends. And there are certain things that happen during the game that can cause it to go down from 5 this way. And then there is a small recharge, usually each turn. It will move 1 back this way. The game lasts for 10 rounds total. The score is kept over here. So when the Soviet Union gains points, there's a counter that's going to move this way. When the U.S. gains points, it'll start moving back this way. If at any point either country gets it all the way to 20, it wins the game. If the game goes 10 rounds and neither country has done that, whoever has the advantage on this chart wins. And like I said before, if it comes to nuclear war, there are some rules around that about when it's triggered, who actually loses in that case. It's not a situation where both players lose, where everybody loses, but there are rules for when this is triggered, one particular player loses. And there's some nuance to that if you know the rules in greater detail, it'll make a little more sense. But I'm not going to get into that for this video. I also noticed that in Young Grasshopper's most recent video, he was recapping his tournament. Sounds like it was very successful. Unfortunately, I was not able to attend, but the next one in 2 years, 2019, I'm hopeful I will be able to venture up to Canada and attend. I know a lot of other people in the Axis and Allies YouTube community were able to do that. But in his most recent video, it sounds like he got a copy of Twilight Struggle as well and might be making some videos. And so I'm very interested to see what he puts out there. And that also encouraged me. I'd been thinking about making a video about this new game for a little while now. I've had a copy for probably about a week and a half, but I just hadn't made one yet. So I'm very interested to see what he has, hoping to learn from him, and also hoping to get some of my own videos on the game out there on the web as well. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.